Laporan dari Amnesty International mengungkapkan gambaran yang mengkhawatirkan tentang kondisi hak asasi manusia atau HAM di seluruh dunia. Nah, pihak berwenang terus menyerang kebebasan universal negara dan kelompok bersenjata, melanggar aturan perang dan rasisme menjadi pemicu konflik. Belum lagi krisis ekonomi, perubahan iklim dan degradasi lingkungan yang memukul komunitas marginal, serta pembela hak asasi manusia yang menjadi sasaran penindasan. Lalu bagaimana situasi hak asasi manusia saat ini di dunia, baik di seluruh dunia maupun di Indonesia? Insight akan membahasnya bersama saya, Desi Anwar.
Amnesty International Indonesia mencatat kondisi hak asasi manusia di 100 hari pertama pemerintahan Prabowo Gibran cenderung mengkhawatirkan karena tidak mengalami kemajuan berarti dan melanjutkan kemunduran. Selama periode 20 Oktober 2024 hingga 20 Januari 2025, Amnesty International menilai 100 hari pertama Kabinet Merah Putih diwarnai berbagai pelanggaran HAM yang dibenarkan oleh kebijakan, keputusan, dan komentar pejabat publik. Warga biasa termasuk anak-anak menjadi korban kriminalisasi dan intimidasi hingga kekerasan dan pembunuhan di luar hukum. Masyarakat adat dan nelayan kehilangan hak-hak atas tanah dan laut, lingkungan, dan sumber daya alam. Kemunduran ini sebagian besar merupakan kelanjutan dari kemunduran pemerintahan Jokowi. Besar kemungkinan situasi HAM ini akan memburuk jika tidak ada perbaikan. Selama pemerintahan Jokowi, para pembela HAM dan warga biasa menghadapi tindakan represi meskipun pemerintah Indonesia mengklaim kemajuan dalam HAM dan supremasi hukum. Dari Januari 2019 hingga Oktober 2024, Amnesty International Indonesia mencatat setidaknya 454 kasus serangan terhadap 1.262 pembela HAM, termasuk pegiat masyarakat adat, jurnalis, dan aktivis lingkungan.
Laporan Amnesty International mendokumentasikan pelanggaran HAM di 155 negara pada tahun 2023, menghubungkan isu global dan regional serta memberikan rekomendasi untuk masa depan yang lebih baik. Untuk membahas lebih dalam mengenai masalah HAM terkini dan juga rekomendasinya, telah hadir bersama saya di studio Sekretaris Jenderal Amnesty International Agnès Callamard. Agnès, how are you?
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure to have you here. And this is your first time in Indonesia. Tell us a little bit about your visit and what did you do, who did you meet, and just the general purpose of. It's lovely having you here, obviously.
Thank you very much. So Amnesty International has an office, has a presence in Indonesia, Amnesty Indonesia. So first and foremost, I came to visit them. It is one of the last established section of Amnesty International. We are a global movement with 72 national entities, and I believe that it may be the 73rd national entity. So we're extremely happy and proud to have to count Amnesty Indonesia among our movement. My visit was driven by the environment, the political situation, and of course the human rights situation in Indonesia. So I have met with a large number of civil society representatives, of victims, families of victims from 1965 all the way to now, including Indonesia and also part of Indonesia such as Papua. So I have covered, I will say, a number of human rights setting, protest, freedom of expression, freedom of religion, blasphemy, and the situation in Papua and a little bit the situation in Aceh. In addition, I have met with officials, from the Supreme Court, from the governor.
Okay, so far, your impressions of the visit, especially, the areas of concern that you see that Indonesia is,
Well, I am afraid that Indonesia fits with the global patterns. I wish I would have gone to Indonesia and discovered a place where the people had resisted the attacks on human rights, but sadly it is not the case. Indonesia fits within the global pattern of rising authoritarian practices, militarization of the public space. It fits within a pattern of excessive use of force in protest. It fits with the patterns of attacks on the right of indigenous people, in particular rights over their ancestral lands, and attacks on the resources within those ancestral lands. So the picture emerging out of Indonesia is very mixed. You know, there is absolutely a trend for the worse. And I'm calling on the people of Indonesia to realize that. I think they do. I'm calling on the government as well to stop this move to rising authoritarian practices, either through the criminalization of lawful protest, criminalization of climate activism, and so on and so forth. It is a global situation.
Yes, and it's very concerning. Even for us in the media, it is concerning, especially since 1998, Indonesia, we have become a democracy, and we are seeing a constant and pushback, and also just the general sort of degradation of
it's
democracy.
A playbook that we find everywhere. So the media, the civil society, the independent judiciary, all kind of commissions that are supposed to be part of the check and balance of all democratic societies. They are being undermined, they are being attacked, and it is time to stop.
Just out of curiosity, from your meeting with the officials so far, what have been the feedback? Or is there any kind of discussion or generative, discussion plus, the way forward on your recommendation?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say that the official that we met may not be the representative of some of those more worrying trends. In general, there is a certain prudence in approaching the issue that I was planning to raise. On the part of the Supreme Court, it was an engaged and extensive conversation. So I think hopefully this particular institution will be committed to defending the independence of the judiciary and its own independence against encroachment by the executive. I will, look, when you have a meeting with officials, you have two options. Either you play the very diplomatic card and try to push your agenda, or it becomes a much more aggressive kind of interaction.
So which one did you?
I went for the other one. It was diplomatic interaction, because the people I was meeting are not in a position to really shift the trend. But within their own capacity, there are things they can do. And this is what I focused on. So the governor does not have a role to play directly on the policing of protest, but he has influence. And he must use that influence to curtail the worst abuses taking place in Jakarta whenever a student or others protest. He must use his influence and indeed his responsibilities fully when it comes to climate issues, the management of flooding and air pollution. That is his responsibilities, and there we can have good engaged conversation on how much he can pursue this objective. With the Supreme Court, it's the same. I mean, they have responsibilities within that context. My call on them is to use every tools in their box to ensure that they defend the rule-based order, that they defend democratic rights, civil and political rights, economic and social rights, and the independence of their institutions. And that is what I'm focusing on. I'm not going to ask them to stop the militarization
Well,
of
no,
society because
I
they can't do that.
Yes, and also I don't think they'll,
No.
take too much heed or
No.
listen to you. But on the whole, how did you find it? Has the conversation been, it's not an entire waste of time of you visiting in Indonesia?
Not at all, and I think it's important for Amnesty to have those opportunities and to call on those institutions and individuals to play their part. The move toward authoritarian practices is not written in some sacred text. It is a product of our action, and it is a product of what individuals do. So it is incumbent upon every one of us with some degree of power or influence to use it in a way that is reinforcing the democratic governance, reinforcing human rights protection. It is our duty, as it is a duty of the media, to protect itself against any kind of encroachment. And more globally, I think Indonesia, as the largest Muslim country around the world, as a real regional superpower, has an incredibly important role to play, similar to the role it played 70 years ago when during the Asian-African conference on decolonization. Right, yes. So part of my visit here was also trying to call on Indonesian executive and other political leaders to recall what they did 70 years ago, what their predecessors did 70 years ago, and to tell them now is the time to do the same, because the world is at a critical junction.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, we all have very short memory here. I mean, there's a lot of unfinished business, and maybe, out of, I don't know, oversight, convenience, or just simply in denial that there have been, and a lot of them are still not addressed. Now, you spoke to some of the victims, some of those impacted. Just out of curiosity, what the sense of that? Do they get the justice, or is
the
are
original
they despairing
sin
of the truth being finally?
That's a big issue for Indonesia, I think. I mean, without making it a complete obstacles, I will say that the original sin, the 1965 massacres,
communism,
that has not been reckoned with, and people are still living in the shadow of what happened in 1965. The victims, of course, their the generation of families, but most crucially, it is holding back Indonesian democracy. It's holding it back because there has been no reckoning, there has been no accountability for the massacres, there has been no justice delivered, and crucially, there are still super decrees that prevent Indonesians from really engaging with what happened. There are super decrees that are still saying that to hold any kind of thought, certain thought, is a criminal offense. So all of that is holding Indonesia back. And, decades after decades, every decades in Indonesian history since then has had some version of, of the repression.
Yep, we'll take a little break, Agnès, but there's so many things that we need to discuss about. I mean, as you mentioned, this is a concerning trend that is happening globally, and Indonesia is just one of the manifestations. And, but is there light at the end of the tunnel? We also hope that, things can be done, and the works that Amnesty International does, I hope, does make a difference when it comes to addressing some of these issues. Insight with Desi Anwar akan segera kembali, tetaplah bersama kami. Kembali bersama Insight with Desi Anwar, saya ditemani Sekjen Amnesty International, Agnès Callamard. Agnès is currently in Indonesia, in Jakarta, and Indonesia is, one of the countries where Amnesty International has its representative. Just looking from sort of a much more global perspective, how do you rate Indonesia's sort of decline? Because we do feel it. I mean, let's not beat about the bush. When it comes to human rights violations, and also the work and the quality of work that comes out of Amnesty International in Indonesia, and how effective is it?
So sadly, the pushback that we are witnessing in Indonesia is part of a global pattern of rising authoritarian practices, a pattern that has been also resulted into, I think, what we need to call a change of era at global level. It was precipitated by Russia's aggression of Ukraine. It was accelerated by the Israel genocide of Palestinians, and it is now on speed dial, super speed dial, under Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And all of those forces are extremely negative for human dignity, for universal values, for multilateral system. I am not suggesting that what we had in place was functioning for the betterment of all communities around the world. Not at all. Amnesty International has been very critical of global governance more generally, of the international financial architecture in particular. But what we have now is is an all-out destruction of what was at least
and shamelessly so.
Absolutely, claiming
and it's becoming sort of the norm. Like this is the way.
Yeah.
Bullying, being aggressive.
Absolutely. It's not just. That's what I often tell people. In the past, we at Amnesty saw many governments violating rights and hiding it. Right now, they're violating it and claiming it as part of who they want to be. They are claiming it as part of the revolution they want to lead, which is basically the annihilation of anything that has been put in place to curtail the worst abuse of power. And that is the world we are witnessing right now. It's the construction of the world led by the Donald Trump of the world, with him leading that process. He's not the only one. It is characterized by the attacks on universal values, meaning anti-racism, gender equality, refugees and migrants' rights. It is characterized...
Discrimination, dehumanizing of entire...
Which is why we have a genocide. Yeah, dehumanization as at the heart of global policies. It is characterized as well by greed, I will say, the search for profit, unhinged, and being placed on the top. This, and America first, we have to.
Or billionaires first.
Yes,
rich
and billionaires,
people first.
absolutely.
The elite first.
Completely unhinged commitment to greed and profit, and what it means is that it is serving the interest of a tiny minority of individuals. People around the world may have fallen for the narrative according to which everyone will get wealthy. Don't get fooled, my dear friends. You won't. You will get poorer and poorer and poorer, while those individuals will get richer through corruption, by holding the levels of power at state level. This is a world that is being constructed.
And corruption
right now.
is rising. You see that.
Absolutely.
And corruption is actually also one of the causes of human rights violations.
Absolutely.
It deprives people of their basic rights.
It is one of the main drivers for human rights violation. It's corruption for the sake of profit accumulation. It's corruption for the sake of extortion, for the sake of grabbing resources that are not used, natural resources in particular in indigenous lands. We see that everywhere. That is what's happening right now in Africa with the Democratic Republic of Congo, where their natural minerals that are essential to artificial intelligence and the new information technology revolution, big conflict, and the country is going into a spiral of violence at the speed of light. It is also, I will say, what you are witnessing in Papua, with, you know, sitting on gold mines of extraordinary quantity, and there too, it's greed, it's corruption that is driving human rights violations. So
the poverty is also part of the human rights. Because it's depriving people of basic rights. Basic rights, whether it's to health, to education, to just living a decent and dignified life as a whole. Now, in Indonesia comes under all this.
Yeah.
What I find is concerning is the support, particularly. I mean, Donald Trump is mandated. He has the support of the majority of the American people, at least so far. I mean, this is it used to be that, like you said, people hide and then pretend that nothing's going on, nothing to see here, and we're doing well, we're upholding human rights. But now we see this blatantly displayed. Why do you think that we have come to this stage of where we are, where we used to think that democracy was sort of the ideal target that every country wants to achieve, the freedom of expression, freedom of, the press and everything. Why do you think?
Look, political scientists, I'm sure, are going to have a lot of materials to debate as to the why. I think it has been a progressive deterioration. Personally, I started with the War on Terror and 9/11, which has initiated a dynamic of attacks on fundamental rights on the basis of national security or counterterrorism. And once you put those two principles at the heart of public policy, national or global, everything can be justified, including attacks on fundamental rights, including dehumanization. Hamas, Palestinians, it's all the same. No one cares that there are 2.2 million people, not all of them are members of Hamas, but the complete dehumanization in the name of your own security. And that's what we have been at Amnesty monitoring since the beginning of the War on Terror. Others may find a different starting point. I think the bottom line is we are now in 2025. It is absolutely a critical moment for our civilization, human civilization. It is a critical moment not just because of Donald Trump, but because of climate, which is an existentialist threat. And someone like Donald Trump and people supporting him are actually precipitating the world into an abyss because they are renegating on the commitment that were made to tackle the global temperature. And who is going to be the victims of it? It's going to be all the vulnerable populations around the world. And
the poor, the marginalized,
and so on and so forth, including people who may be voting for Donald Trump, who may be voting for your president, who may be voting for the Argentinian president, and so on and so forth. It is a moment in time where, disinformation, misinformation, the fact that there is no truth left, the fact that social media has become...
it becomes the amplifier, basically.
Amplifier of lies.
Social media has a big role in just blowing this up, in a global proportion.
And it is owned by individuals who have shown their true face over the last months. The big tech companies. Amnesty International has been denouncing the business model of big tech for many years because at heart it is about capturing people's data and it's about surveillance, unhinged, for the purpose of profit. We have denounced them. People were a little bit reluctant, I will say, to confront them because there was this idea a bit idealistic vision of internet being the new space for democratization of communication. Well, you just have to look at what happened on the day Donald Trump was, was made president at the beginning of January. He was surrounded by big tech companies who applauded when he dehumanized transgender, attacked anti-racism and diversity, and they were there applauding the attacks on fundamental universal values. So we are confronting right now an unholy alliance, I will say, of
authoritarian figures, plus rich billionaires, big techs, and those are the ones with control, who have control and act, they create these platforms.
And Amnesty is warning everyone that what we are witnessing right now is the emergence of techno-autocracies. In other words, it is not the state controlling technology for the sake of controlling expression, which is a model we see everywhere, possibly including here. But right now what we are witnessing is a new phenomena, which is the technology and the big tech controlling the state. This is what's happening in the United States, when someone like Elon Musk has access to trillions of data of every American citizen. Imagine that in the hand.
They're doing that. Doge is already dismantling US aid and a bunch of other things that have been seen as
huge consequences, again, for the most vulnerable people. So, our call is, wake up, people, wake up. They may pretend that they are fighting for you or for a better world. The only thing they are fighting for is their pocket, is their profit. And the victims will be, first of all the vulnerable populations around the world, beginning in the United States, and after that, it will be you. It will be me. It will not stop.
And it's probably already heading there. Let's take a break, because we see similar things happening in Europe as well.
Yes.
I mean, this is, like you said, it's like a virus that is going around the world with the speed of light, made easy by, the technology, digitalization. And also, part of it is, the free media is no longer seen as the beacon for truth. It's been completely undermined. So, tetaplah bersama kami, Inside with Desi Anwar akan segera kembali. Insight with Desi Anwar masih bersama Sekjen Amnesty International Agnès Callamard. Agnès saat ini sedang berada di Indonesia, and Amnesty International now. You mentioned universal values. Also, we thought it's universal values. Things like, everybody's equal, everybody should be born free, and we should, be free to express our opinions or practice our belief, and we should be tolerant of each other, and we should celebrate diversity, and we should, aim for equality, where everybody has the same right, whether it's to their education, health, and opportunities to feel safe, find good work and jobs, and so on and so forth. These are universal values that we are seeing are no longer universal. If anything, we've seen the purveyors of those values, like us in the media, for example. We want truth, accountability, justice, and so on and so on, being demeaned, demeaned, made fun of, and even abandoned altogether. Donald Trump and Elon Musk, and they get their information from their social media platform. X is a place where you can find policies. I mean, this is unheard of. They tweet policies.
The
latest in Donald Trump is telling you better Hamas, you better give up, otherwise we're going to obliterate. Well, they've already obliterated the entire area. So Where does Amnesty International stand? I mean, we see actually defenders of human rights being
Attacked.
completely, not
Yeah.
only attacked, but mocked, you know, as, you know, we see
Yeah.
the word liberal and, you know, freedom and tolerance is something that is really weak and...
Yes and no. We see that more than maybe we had seen it before because it is now permitted. There was a time when attacking the notion that we were born free and equal, there was a time where this would have been done in very small, little quarters. It is now clamored by political leaders and on social media. The fact that it is more present in the public space does not mean that we have been weakened or that we have decreased in number. I would like to remind us all that for a number of years now, we have seen not only a rise in authoritarianism, but we have also seen a rise in protest from young people, from students, from climate activists. On the Palestinian genocide, millions of people, week after week, have gone to the street of their capital to protest, and they have never stopped. And to this day, they are still marching. We are witnessing people in Bangladesh toppling a regime. We are seeing people in Sri Lanka putting to power a new kind of political actor with more commitment to human rights. And we will see much more resistance coming out of the United States, as we are seeing it coming out of Europe. 2024 was deemed the year of election. It did not bring the kind of authoritarian wave that we were expecting. There were many places where people pushed back. So yes, we have very powerful actors right now who are in a position where they can actually destroy or annihilate multilateral institutions. Through their economic power, they can force governments into submission. That is what the United States is doing as the master bully of the world, forcing governments to kneel in front of King Trump. But not the people, not the people. And we need to recall that there are people the world over that are resisting and have resisted for decades, and we in Europe are learning from them how to, in turn, lead our own resistance movement. So there is, in the making, against the change of era, speed-dialed by Donald Trump, there is a global resistance movement that is emerging.
By
there
who?
is no doubt.
But young people?
Young people,
Because I
climate
also
activists.
see a lot of young people are influenced by this kind of...
Look, that's what
Yeah.
I've been told, that they turn to the right-wing agenda. I think they've always been a part of them turning to this agenda. That is not my experience. No, in Indonesia, people were marching against dark Indonesia a few
We take to the
months,
streets, yeah.
you take to the street. It is happening everywhere. So yes, there will always be some people who will be tempted by the ultra-right, super racist, anti-woman agenda. Of course, they've always been there. I do not believe that the new generation, the young generation, is going to be the driver of that process. And I have seen no evidence of it. I see, on the contrary, them in the street and protesting. I see them leading the climate movement, and because of the repression, they're going to be more and more strident. They will take more risk, which is what worries me. We have now people in power that are prepared to use real nasty force against 16
And
years old.
they use all the equipment they have. They use the military,
Absolutely.
they use the police. But Agnès, you know, if this is what it's going to be, basically it's a clash.
There will be clash.
This
there
is
will
not
be
something that, you know, because it'll
We
be
need to be
armed
smart.
conflict. It will be...
Well, look, I'm not going to call for for that kind of resistance. What I am calling for as the Secretary General of Amnesty International is for people to be organized, to join collective, Amnesty or others, to learn their landscape, to understand how the other side act, to plan, to prepare, to have lawyers on site, to have people monitoring what's happening, to make use of social media, to communicate their own history and their own version of what's happening. I'm calling on them to be super smart, to learn to mitigate the risk, to train on non-violent reactions, to train on how to protect body parts, to do all of that, because yes, the other side will be more and more violent. And we need to be prepared for that. I need to be prepared. I need to prepare Amnesty International. Journalists need to be prepared to see what happened in Gaza to become a global phenomenon, because there was no accountability for what Israel did to Palestinian journalists.
Because of the United States.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's, as the grand
which
enabler
was not a Donald
and
Trump
abettor.
issue, by the way. It was a Joe Biden issue.
Yeah, well, it's always been. I mean, the whole of the existence of Israel is because of the support from the United States. American first, and unfortunately, America, they're spending on defense, they're spending on weapons. I mean, they're bigger than all the countries in the world. And the other thing is, unlike the previous wars, now we have nuclear weapons.
This is it. We have
now
weapons
we have
to annihilate all of us.
Cyber technology. We have drones. We have everything to just blow up
and
the planet.
we have artificial intelligence that can spread havoc in all societies.
Now, the last, I mean, I've been told we have a break, but this is what I want to discuss next.
Okay.
Is when we talk about diplomacy, now there's a different type of diplomacy, which is basically not diplomacy. It's humiliating your best friends.
Yeah.
It's completely, bullying, the people who you're supposed to be supporting or you are supposed to be sitting at a table with. So there's a very strange thing coming on, and now the idea of World War III is just around the corner as we see, Europe. In Europe, kind of like, okay, we better arm ourselves, we better get ready because,
Absolutely.
no one's gonna, we're not gonna play nice anymore, and that is concerning. Let's take a little break. Inside with Desi Anwar akan segera kembali. Tetaplah bersama kami. Kembali bersama Insight with Desi Anwar, saya ditemani Sekjen Amnesty International, Agnès Callamard. Agnès, we saw it, right? The display in full live television that it is unheard of, of President of the Ukraine
being humiliated.
Being completely humiliated by Donald Trump and his vice president in front of the whole world, and basically overturning of sort of the global order that we've seen so far. Basically saying, just give up and negotiate with Russia, and then you have the response from the European countries. Basically, Donald Trump said, we're not going to give you anything anymore. So, just your thoughts and the implication. Because it is global. It has global implication. Because these are members of the Security Council, the United Nations Security Council. We have the United States, we have Russia, we have China, and we have France, we have UK. We have the whole world hanging on to this. What will happen next?
Yeah. Look, I think what I am witnessing in my various meetings and visit is that many countries and many governments are still sitting on the fence, not quite sure, observing what does it mean for us, not taking a
Maybe
stand.
a little bit in denial. No, they can't be happening.
Voilà.
Maybe this.
And I think what I want to say is, first, they came for Ukraine. And I was not Ukrainian. They're a bunch of white people, did not care. Then they came for Palestinians. I'm not Arabs. I don't care. Plus, I support Israel. Then they came for transgender and blacks and women. I'm neither one of them, so I did not take a stand. You know what happened. At the end of the day, when they will come for you, there will be no one prepared to support you. So I think governments really need to wake up, move out of their sitting on the fence and start planning for the worst. They must understand that it is not going to stop.
What is the worst? U.S. siding with Russia?
The worst is that it is going to, after Ukraine, after Palestine, it will be Panama, it may be Greenland, it may be Papua because of all the national
Canada
resources.
is already
it will
being
be
attacked.
Could be Canada. There is no end to it. This is the new imperialism or colonialism of the 21st century. Whether it is being driven by military might or whether it is being driven by big corporate actors, that is what is happening. In the name of America first, in the name of profit, very powerful actors are prepared to rewrite the rules that have taken decades to be put in place, are prepared to rewrite them for their own benefit, not for the benefit of anyone else. And I do hope that governments, not just Europe has finally reached a form of awareness of what's happening. Where is Africa? Where is Asia? Where is ASEAN? Where is Indonesia? Big, powerful country. What are you waiting for to say something about Donald Trump calling for the extermination of all Palestinians on the ground that there may be hostage being hidden in their house? Come on. What are you waiting for to stand up? This is what is worrying me, that everyone is sitting on the fence thinking, oh, maybe I can take benefits out of it. Some will, the richest people may, but the vast majority of Indonesian, Malaysian, Sri Lankan, they won't. It is really crucial for government to engage into a resistance posture.
But in what form, Agnès?
Well, at least taking a stand and saying no.
So let's start with Europe, because now we see the US decoupling from Europe, and there is this business with Russia, because Russia's closer to Europe physically, and then there is this other thing, which is China. And there's going to be, some kind of war. Now China is saying, go and show, give it to us. You want trade war, you want whatever war.
I'm prepared.
Well, we're all prepared.
Watching Taiwan.
Yeah. So, where do the civil society, the members, and Amnesty International, how can we play to influence? Because these are the ones with the power, with the weapons, with the money, and also with the influence and all.
And we need to acknowledge
technology.
And recognize the limitation of what we can do. But within the scope of what we can do, we've got to use every single tool. That is called resistance. Short of armed resistance, it is a form of civil disobedience placed to the highest level. It is demanding of our government that they do not oversee the demise of the old world order for the creation of a new order that is meant to benefit only the privileged few. That is not what we sign on to as global citizens. So it is incumbent upon every one of us to call on our elected representative, to call on our moral representative in our church. Here in Indonesia, the largest Muslim population in the world, we have an American president calling for the genocide of the Palestinians. What are you waiting for? What is the religious leadership waiting for to take a stand and demand that elected representatives take a stand? We cannot let that space being occupied, solely occupied by one single narrative. They need to understand that there will be resistance, that people are going to stand up, and just saying no is a beginning. It is not the end, but it must start somewhere. And right now we're not seeing enough of it. We need to see more governments, more moral leaders, more religious organizations standing up and saying, come on, elected representative, executive of my country, that is not on. You must say something and you must oppose it. We need to occupy that space. Right now it's not being done. There is no red lines being put in the sand except for Europe. And the rest of the world is thinking, okay, let's
wait
look
and see.
at the white people fighting.
We don't have the weapons. We don't
it's
have,
not about weapons. It's about moral values. It's about looking at what's being done to Ukrainians, being aggressed. It's a form of colonization. We're talking about Bangul 70 years ago. What's happening to Ukrainians and to Palestinians? That should be enough for Asia and Africa to rise up and just say, look, you know, this is not what we sign on. These are our red lines. Do not go further than that. No one is doing that at the moment.
And because they're also busy with their own problems at home. We are busy with, you know, our
Everyone
own
is busy.
with our own
Everyone
problems
is
with
busy.
corruption, with our own the human rights violations that's going on, with our own you know, history, and then with our own.
I mean, they need to call, you know, ASEAN need to call for a meeting and say, okay, how are we going to deal with Donald Trump? What are we saying? Issuing a public statement. African Union. I mean, the institutions are there. What is lacking is the vision and the courage. Let me be very clear.
Yeah, I think, you know, we've still got another segment of our conversation, but it would be good to have some kind of, not just recommendations, but real implementable things that can sort of shift, you know, the pendulum, which is now like swinging way you know, to the extremes. Tetaplah bersama kami, Insight with Desi Anwar masih akan kembali sesaat lagi. Insight with Desi Anwar masih bersama Sekretaris Jenderal Amnesty International, Agnès Callamard. Agnès, thank you very much for your impassioned, you know, appeal, because this wake up. You know, maybe all this time, you know, he's seen as, you know, people laugh at him. No, it can't be real. But it's actually, it's a very dangerous. He is a very dangerous. What he's doing is very, very, very dangerous, and it has huge repercussions. I mean, we've seen what he's doing with, you know, Canada, making their best friend's neighbor into an enemy. I mean, it's just beyond, you know, just any, you know, common sense. Now, you mentioned this is the time for common sense, for universal values, to actually, you know, resist and do something and say, no, this is not right. Bullying is not right. You know, attacking other countries is, you know, not right. Genocide is definitely not right. But do you feel that Amnesty International, what kind of support are you still getting? Are you being, you know, attacked? But, you know, now the, you know, if you say something sort of fairly commonsensical, people say, "Oh, you're woke, you're a snowflake,
or you're anti-Semitic, or all that."
You're weak. Oh, stop crying, and you know, there's always this kind of the language. We talk about the language. How do we converse in this?
We don't. I don't think there is any space for dialogue with those that attack us. I mean, you know.
Exactly. But how has Amnesty International?
I mean, it has been very bad. Particularly, I will say, over the position we took on Israel genocide of Palestinians. We have been attacked merciless by pro-Israel lobby groups, by so-called NGOs that have been set up by the Israeli government in order to undermine NGOs or in order to undermine the United Nations. And they are putting one in place right now to undermine the International Criminal Court. So I personally am attacked every day through dozens, hundreds, thousands of texts. I don't read them anymore. I do not want to be defined by them, and I don't want the strategy, my communication work, to be just in response to those ridiculous attacks that are part of an organized attack.
But is it stopping you from doing your work?
No, of course not.
What about the support towards Amnesty International? Is it still there?
It won't stop us, because we're big and we have the backbone and we're offering that backbone to others. It won't stop us because we have others within our organization that can take, when you get a bit weak, when you get tired, when you get depressed, someone else is going to pick up the flame and run with it. So I'm not worried about Amnesty. We have, like I mentioned, 72, 73 national entities from Norway to Indonesia, including South Africa, Senegal. We have some section in Argentina and in the United States. Every one of them is prepared to stand up and resist. Now, there will be moments where one of them is going to be weaker, but another one will get stronger. So that's how privileged as an international movement. And what I need to do as the Secretary General is to be resilient. That is absolutely key, not to let those attacks define me or define Amnesty International, but being smart about those attacks and what they mean. It's about vision, direction, settings, and risk mitigation. Always risk mitigation. If there are several paths to an objective, let's really look at them very carefully and let's see which one will deliver the greatest objectives with less risk to our members, physical or otherwise, to our reputation, to our financial sustainability, and so on and so forth. That is a kind of analytical framework that we must engage with in order to push back and continue to denounce,
But are we ready for the worst? Should the worst come? Because, things escalate. Every single day there's always something.
I don't know.
Well, us as humanity.
As a humanity, of course not. If the worst is the use of nuclear weapon, there will be ripple effect. Yeah. If there is one using nuclear weapon, I cannot see how others are not going to do it in retaliation, out of fear or whatever. So that would be a catastrophe. If there is a global war of some kind of a more military version of it, look, the reality of war and warfare is that it is no longer keeping civilians out. And it is increasingly not keeping civilians out. Every war of the last
we've seen what's happening in Ukraine and how many people have died,
in Gaza. Or in Israel, because Israel civilians were also targeted, by the way. So, no. So let's be very clear that no, we are not prepared for the worst because the worst is unimaginable. We've lived, many parts of the world have lived in relative safety and security since the 1960s or 1970s. So, and even earlier than that for Europe. So it is very difficult for people around the world, except if you are living in Democratic Republic of Congo or in Sudan or in Ukraine right now. It's very difficult to imagine the worst. But what those people are telling you is the worst can happen tomorrow. Be prepared. And how do we get prepared? We get prepared by calling on our leaders, political leaders, moral leaders. I want to reiterate that now is the time to put your red line in the sand and to say, not in my name, not in our name. If we do not have a more organized, collective movement from governments around the world with forceful messaging to Donald Trump and to those supporting him, we're going to be in big trouble. Because if everyone thinks they can get some benefit out of that situation, we are all going to fall into an abyss.
Thank you, Agnès. Thank you for reminding us. And let's hope it won't come to pass. I mean, we are, on the brink of something, but let's hope that there is light at the end of the tunnel, and we can if...
Absolutely, we can. We can.
If we speak up.
Absolutely. People must speak up. They must speak up. Now is the time.
Okay. Once again, thank you and good luck
Thank
with
you
your
very much.
work, and keep up your spirit and your energy.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Iya, demikian Insight with Desi Anwar kali ini. Anda juga dapat menyaksikan tayangan ini di cnnindonesia.com dan di YouTube CNN Indonesia, Insight with Desi Anwar. Sampai jumpa. Stay safe. Bye-bye.